Renew Bahamas seeking to alter its landfill management contract with the government, parliamentarians attributing corruption in this country to the United States of America, and a member of parliament warning of a hidden agenda on the gender equality vote. Find out about these stories and others. I'm your host, Nico Scavella, and this is the Tribune's Top 5. Environmental group Save the Bays has been granted an injunction against 3 government officials, preventing them from further disclosing the group's confidential information in Parliament. The injunction, granted by Justice Indra Charles on Thursday, prohibits Foreign Affairs and Immigration Minister Fred Mitchell, Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald, and Attorney General Allison Maynard Gibson from any further appropriation, perusal, use, publication, or disclosure in Parliament or elsewhere of any correspondence, including emails belonging to the applicants. The order lasts until May 12. In a writ filed in the Supreme Court on Thursday, the applicants, Coalition to Save Clifton and Zachary Hampton-Bacon, claim that the government, acting through Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Fitzgerald, and Tall Pines MP Leslie Miller, obtained private and confidential emails and attachments belonging to the applicants and disclosed confidential information contained in this correspondence during the course of parliamentary proceedings on March 15th and 17th. Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Mitchell, and Mrs. Maynard Gibson are named as respondents in the matter. The writ is requesting Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Fitzgerald, within 7 days or such other time as the court may fix, deliver to the applicants the originals and copies of the applicants' correspondence in whatever form they are held in. Save the Bays has also requested that the respondents permanently destroy or delete all electronic records and testify under oath who the information was shared with. In a joint statement on Friday, however, Mr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Mitchell said the injunction is a breach of their privileges as parliamentarians and that it called for Parliament to, and I quote, resist any encroachment on its rights, end quote. The two men also said that they will continue to speak freely on their constituents' behalf and that Save the Bays should stand by for more to come. Last month, Mr. Fitzgerald accused Save the Bays of being a political organization seeking to overthrow the PLP government under the guise of an environmental group. During his contributions to the House of Assembly, Mr. Fitzgerald read private emails from Save the Bays members and others, which he said bolstered his claims. The disclosures came as part of a fierce political debate over claims included in an alleged murder-for-hire plot outlined in court documents filed against Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygaard by billionaire Louis Bacon and several other Save the Bays directors. Renew Bahamas on Wednesday confirmed it is in active talks with the government to alter the terms of its 5-year landfill management contract after substantial losses showed its original financial projections were invalid. Gerhard Bukis, Renew Bahamas' chief executive and president, told Tribune Business that change was essential if the New Providence landfill manager was to have a viable business going forward, as it had lost millions of dollars to date. Mr. Bukis also revealed that the company could lose up to $750,000 in revenue as a result of the latest landfill fire, which had damaged a key component of its materials recycling operation. Predicting that this facility could be out of action for 6 to 8 weeks, the Renew Bahamas chief said it now had a better understanding of what a viable landfill management operation requires. However, while confirming that the company is trying to renegotiate its management contract, Mr. Bukis denied it had laid off any of its 124 employees. The financial issues came to light after the Free National Movement revealed on Wednesday an email sent by Renew Bahamas to one of its vendors, informing them that it was unable to make payment in full for services rendered until there was a resolution to the discussions with the Christie administration. The F&M described the email as extremely troubling, given the landfill's frequent fires and other problems, and urged the government to come clean and fully disclose the original contract with Renew Bahamas. Renew Bahamas' attempt after only 2 years to renegotiate its contract is likely to be a further blow to the Christie administration, which is already under public pressure over the recurring landfill fires and the associated environmental, health, and economic impact on nearby communities and businesses. A jury heard this week how a French company was so determined to obtain a multi-million-dollar project from the Bahamas Electricity Corporation that it attempted to make contact with former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham and then Deputy Prime Minister Frank Watson. The French company in question, Alstom SA, wanted officials to reconsider the bid it knew was going to be rejected. American Mark Smith was continuing his testimony that began on Tuesday concerning his role in an Alstom SA BEC bribery scheme to win the New Providence Expansion Phase 3 contract with BEC. Smith testified that Alstom SA wrote to BEC executives querying about the integrity of the evaluation process and a reconsideration of their proposal. A response had been given by Patrick Hanna, BEC's assistant general manager in December 2000, that the company's communications were not only inappropriate but were also in breach of the terms of the bidding process where they risked their bid bid being rejected outright. Smith has received immunity from the prosecution, notwithstanding his admission that he accepted a cut of hundreds of thousands of dollars to relay to Alstom SA information gathered by an insider to the tendering process that would bolster the French firm's chances at winning the contract bid over its Korean rival Hanjung. Smith alleged that 79-year-old Freddie Solomon Ramsey struck a deal that allowed him to receive a third of some $600,000 as a paid informant for a French company. Crown Prosecutor Garvin Gaskin referred the witness and the jury to documents that concerned letters from Alstom SA to the then Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and BEC executives in December 2000. The letter to Mr. Ingram made mention of Alstom SA's gratitude for its bid being in contention for the project. However, the company also expressed reservation about the evaluation process, given that its bid met international standards that their consultants were satisfied with. The letter further noted that the Inter-American Development Bank's opinion had been sought on the matter and urged that their proposal was more convincing than Hanjung's, which was not likely to meet the 18-month deadline for completing the project. Similar sentiments were expressed in the letter to Mr. Watson, where Alstom SA asked for a reconsideration of its bid before a decision was made. The French company then sent another letter via facsimile addressed directly to BEC's Assistant General Manager, Mr. Hanna, noting that it had received information from various sources that Hanjung was openly alleging being awarded the contract. Alstom SA reasoned that if the contract was awarded to Hanjung, there would be a construction delay for the project and maintenance risk from a company that required the International Monetary Fund to salvage it from ruin a few years earlier. The French company feared that Hanjung may have been influencing the bidding process and in its letter indicated that an IDB representative in the Bahamas was sent a copy of the same concerning Alstom SA's reservations. The jury also saw a letter Alstom SA received from Mr. Hanna, who took issue with the French company's attempt to discredit another bidder or the evaluation process, and noted that the letters are in direct contravention of the tender process. The jury saw subsequent correspondences noting that Alstom SA had ultimately lost the bid to Hanjung, but they were not overly concerned given Hanjung's unattainable summer 2002 deadline and the upcoming general election prior to that. Alstom SA, in communication with Smith, considered bringing the opposition party, which was the PLP, into their plan to inevitably get the project. However, Ramsey allegedly said not to pursue that route. Ramsey, based on exchanges with Smith and Alstom SA, reportedly met with Mr. Watson following the BEC board's unanimous decision awarding the contract to Hanjung, expressing concerns of impropriety on the Korean company's part. The awarding of the contract was suspended pending an investigation into the concern expressed by Ramsey. In March 2001, Alstom SA was awarded the contract for the Phase 3 project. Tall Pines MP Leslie Miller this week blasted a recent U.S. State Department report on corruption in this country, saying that if Bahamians are crooked, it is because they were taught to be that way from the, and I quote, damn Americans, end quote. In an interview with the Tribune, Mr. Miller insisted that he didn't put too much weight on the newly released report, adding that he viewed it as baseless because it, and I quote, sure as hell didn't provide any proof of its arbitrary findings, end quote. Mr. Miller also said he doubts the report will have any serious implications for the country. His statements came despite the U.S. State Department's 2015 country report on human rights practices in this country. The scathing report pinpointed the government's feeble implementation of anti-corruption laws buttressed by a vulnerable contract procurement process. The report, released last week, said the government procurement process was opaque given that there was no requirement for open public tenders or allowance for award decisions to be reviewed. The report noted that there were frequent reports of government corruption during the year, but did not give specific examples. When contacted by the Tribune, Mr. Miller said in response, and I quote, I don't put too much weight on the U.S. and what they have to say. I pay no attention to them. The report is baseless because they sure as hell didn't provide any proof. If Bahamians are crooked, most people who make you crooked are the damn Americans who you deal with. They are the ones who teach you how to be crooked. He continued, and I quote, the U.S. just arbitrarily makes these statements and then people ask for them to show proof and there is none. It is just observations made generally by companies that didn't get contracts when they felt they should have gotten them, even though a lot of times they insist that the process is being rigged to make sure they get the contract. This is a two-sided affair, end quote. Mr. Miller also insisted that the granting of government contracts to political supporters will never stop because politicians must, and I quote, do what they have to do, end quote, to win elections. However, Mr. Miller's statements drew criticism from both the Free National Movement and the Democratic National Alliance, with the former calling Mr. Miller's statements a brazen admission of the government's role in the endemic corruption that plagues the country.
Marco City MP Greg Moss on Thursday said some parliamentarians are pushing for the passage of the constitutional referendum's fourth bill because of their homosexual identities.
Mr. Moss's comments came during a forum for pastors hosted by the Save Our Bahamas Committee, a group pushing Bahamians to vote no to the fourth proposed constitutional amendment, which aims to prohibit discrimination based on sex by inserting the word sex into Article 26 of the Constitution. To this, Mr. Moss said, and I quote, "Anybody who doesn't understand that we have people in the House of Assembly right now who are living a lifestyle they want to justify and validate by the passage of this legislation is just closing his eyes. We have people in the House right now who are determined that if this is their last session in the House, their swan song will be that they brought their community into preeminence through the Constitution and they protected their right to really live their lifestyle after they're finished with the House. This is what's going on," end quote. Mr. Moss further argued that parliamentarians don't have the guts to pass a law allowing same-sex marriage through Parliament. Therefore, they are promoting a platform that would allow the decision to be made by the courts. The government, meanwhile, rejects the idea that the fourth bill could lead to same-sex marriage. Officials have said that the word sex refers only to one's status as male or female, not sexual orientation. Mr. Moss disagreed, however, stating on Thursday, and I quote, "My sex cannot just be me standing around looking in the mirror at what God gave me. My sex has to be much more than that. My sex is my sexuality. It includes the way I express myself, my sexual orientation, and if you give me that word as a lawyer, I'm going to run a train through it," end quote. Two religious groups have launched campaigns against some of the bills in the past week. Save Our Bahamas, the group that opposed the 2013 gambling referendum, launched a Vote No campaign against the fourth constitutional bill. Bishop Walter Hanschel of Great Commission Church has also formed a group which opposes both the fourth and second bills.
Want to get in on the discussion? Well, here's how you can. Just log on to our website, www.tribune242.com. Like us on Facebook, Tribune News Network. Subscribe to our YouTube page, Tribune242, or send us a tweet at Tribune242.